Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.
Hello, my name is Andrew Faas, and welcome to Following the Golden Rule.
And I'm your co-host, Jay Remer, and for 26 weeks, Andy and I will be discussing the ABCs of building character. We invite your questions and comments on our Facebook page as well as our LinkedIn page, where this broadcast will be reposted. Last week, we covered D is for dependable, and we got a lot of positive feedback. But one of the things that came up was a call for more empathy. And so I'm wondering, before we get started on emotionally intelligent, why did you pick that instead of empathy?
Well, the reason I chose emotional intelligence, and actually there's a number of reasons, but maybe the question is why didn't I choose empathy? And we also got some critical comments that perhaps we weren't showing as much empathy as perhaps being interpreted as preaching to our audience. And the reason is people need more than being felt sorry for or pitied. And there's a connotation to that, similar to what we talked about with compassion. Mm-hmm. And yes, empathy is needed. And I try to practice that, throughout everything I do. However, being emotionally intelligent is a better skill and a condition or a character to have, in so much that you can do something about it. Mm-hmm. And the whole area of emotional intelligence is to get people to make emotionally intelligent decisions versus emotional decisions.
Mm-hmm. So given your experience, which a lot of people may not be familiar with, but you've been significantly involved with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence for a number of years. So that would make you somewhat of an expert on the subject. And so I think this will be a lively discussion. I'm looking forward to hearing your insights.
Great. Well, I guess I am an expert in emotional intelligence, and working with Yale over the last now 6 years has given me, I guess, a little different perspective in terms of understanding the science of emotional intelligence. Where I think I've added value to them is helping them better appreciate how emotional intelligence needs to be applied. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've been applying for pretty much the bulk of my career, which was kind of concurrent when the book Emotional Intelligence came out, and it was required reading for everyone in management, and conceptually everybody got it. But very few people were able to apply it in their work environment. Even today, so 30 years later, the whole concept of emotional intelligence is seen to be kind of a soft science, and intended to basically make people happy.
Yeah.
And it is a hard science. And it's one of the reasons that emotional intelligence, applying emotional intelligence, is very hard to do. So the whole question of emotional intelligence, which I should describe, is the ability to understand your own emotions and then regulate them. Mm-hmm. and differentiate between regulation and controlling them, because all of us have been conditioned, or most of us have been conditioned to suppress our emotions. And as I mentioned in another segment, when you come to work, you leave your emotions at the door. Today, more than ever, we're realizing that emotions can only be suppressed for so long. And what everyone today has in common is either anger, fear, frustration, and a lot of negative emotions because of what's happening to them.
Well, I know that emotions are a very important part of our makeup. And when we get, I know that in some of the previous episodes you've used fairly strong terminology about how you feel about certain things, and those are emotional. And it's important to recognize our emotions and to accept them, but we need to think about them and how do they affect other people. And so that's that's the difference I see in having an emotional response and having an emotionally intelligent response. So let me just run this one by you. The people who are involved in these protests, and you can pick any kind of a protest you like, but the Black Lives Movement one is the current one. People who march in these protests with physical distancing and their masks and all that peacefully would, to my mind, be demonstrating emotional intelligence. And people who are just looting and carrying on would be coming from just a straight angry emotional place. Is that's
a good analogy? Yes, and the message that I would have to both is that it must go beyond the protest.
Yes.
And I think by protesting, it becomes very therapeutic. And because you are at least doing something about it. By lashing out, I think it enhances the anger, if you will, and makes it worse for the individual doing it, and certainly for others who are at the receiving end of it. The thing that we have to all recognize is there's going to be a lot of changes required from everyone. And I speak more from the concept of the work environment. Because of coronavirus falling at the time it fell, most of our institutions were broken. And coronavirus hastened the inevitable. And it is requiring pretty much every organization to look at how they operate and what activities they should be cutting back on to just survive. And there's going to be more things that we are going to be expecting from people. And they're going to be more negative in nature than positive. Now, to help people accept those changes and be part of those changes requires discussion, debate, dialogue, and in some cases even defiance. But as long as people have the skills necessary to have those discussions, so that they may not like it, but they will accept it and be part of it in terms of the go-forward position.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so key today, because people can influence their destinies versus allowing it to be dictated to them. And again, we have no idea what so many people are going through.
No.
And and certainly no idea what the future looks like.
I think one of the things that you mentioned, this importance of having civil discourse, goes back to the concept of the requirement to be able to communicate with one another effectively. And I think communicating with one another civilly, with including everyone, and being as frank about expressing your feelings and your thoughts as possible is going to lead us to a broader understanding of how each of us feel. And I think that if we have more understanding of how we feel, and that the importance of being heard, we need to be heard. And in order to be heard, you have to present your discussion in a civilized way. Otherwise, it's a rant, and people will get turned off. So how do you feel the importance of communicating in this civil way lends itself to emotional intelligence?
Well, it's a long question, but I'd say all of it.
Yeah.
And it's the ability to convey something in very clear, concise terms. And in the work environment, the manager's job is to develop a relationship with the people that they're responsible for. Mm-hmm. And the way you develop a relationship is to understand who they are and how they feel and why they feel the way they do, and express that. First understand it, mm-hmm. and set the expectations that they have for people in those clear, concise terms, but to be able to deliver it so that the person is able to listen to it. Mm-hmm. And on the receiving end, you've got to be conditioned to receive critical feedback. Mm-hmm. And receive negative feedback, to be challenged on a position, and we don't do enough of that. And in the organizations I've been responsible for, I've made emotional intelligence a core competency, mm-hmm. and that is something that very few organizations, notwithstanding that everybody conceptually understands it, but very few organizations have adopted that as a core skill.
So what's happening is that, or what you're suggesting is that people in a position of leadership need to change their attitude from just telling people what to do to listening to what people have to say. And if we go back to a statistic that you've used in the past, where 75%, roughly, anywhere from 2/3 to 75% of people don't actually like going to work where they work, they don't trust their boss, they don't feel that they're supported, and so forth. To me, that if you do the math, it comes out to 3/4 of the bosses are not doing their job in a way that is collaborative. And that's a lot of shifting to do. And what do you think the chances of that happening are, and how do we make it happen?
Well, the statistic is 77% of people do not feel that they're getting the support from their supervisor. And the research that we've done through both the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and through Mental Health America would suggest that the only conversation that most employees have with their boss is during the annual performance review or when things go south.
Right.
And that's where we need the civil discussion, debate, disagreement, even defiance, mm-hmm. where people feel comfortable in both giving either direction or advice or criticism, and also receiving it. And again, doing it in a intelligent way, so that people actually hear the message, so that people are comfortable in delivering the message. And I'll give a caveat. You know, this is not a a simple book you read, i.e., emotional intelligence. It's not attending the many seminars that have devoted that's devoted to emotional intelligence. It's actually practicing it and applying it in a consistent way all of the time, in every point of interaction that you have with the other person. And it's being able to determine how it's being received and responding to that. It's also factoring in the whole, and this is where you do get into empathy, that the amount of stress that people are under both at work and at home. And I get a lot of requests, and certainly through Mental Health America, we've gotten a lot of requests for tools and programs on mental health.
For organizations.
For organizations, and the best mental health program are not hiring a bunch of psychiatrists to go around and help people cope, or an insurance program that you have for when people are no longer able to work or have to modify their work because of a mental health or addiction issue. It's reducing the amount of unnecessary stress that people face at work and at home. And first, you have to understand, what are those stress factors? And as leaders, most of the time, we're oblivious to it. And the reason we're oblivious to it is nobody tells us. And we have to get people feeling very comfortable to say, you know, I'm angry.
Yes.
I'm afraid. And being able to respond to that in an empathetic way, but you can do something about it.
Yeah.
And the doing something about it is pretty simple. If I know this is causing stress, and I can reduce it or eliminate it, then do it.
Yeah.
And that's the most effective mental health program that any organization could put on it. Understand what people are going through, and help them through that by relieving them of those stress points.
It really takes us back right to the title of the show, Following the Golden Rule. How would you want to be treated if you were in this position? And that's the part that people sometimes forget to think about, and it's so critically important, but so basic.
Well, what gives me a little bit of hope is the commonality that people are experiencing today. All of us. I doubt there's anyone on earth today, unless some of my one percenters who are still living in a delusional state, as evidenced by the stock market today. Very few people are not under significant stress.
Right.
And fear of the future, because we're going into uncharted territory. So taking that common situation that everybody have these emotions. Yes, if I've got it, how do I want somebody to support me? And be guided by that in terms of how can I support others. And managers and coworkers today can start getting to know who they work with, and what they're going through, and in a tangible way help them the best they can.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is it's important for people to develop their relationships further.
Yeah.
The employer-employee relationship they need to become more engaged with one another and understand what makes each other tick.
Well, all of us, whether it's in the work or in family or association, and I this whole series is somewhat frustrating me, and let me tell you why. First, I've got to confess, I'm plagiarizing a lot of this shit, and I stole it. I stole the curriculum for the set of our articles, and what we're doing today, and other work that I've done from Dorothy Rigsby. Now, Dorothy was also my neighbor and kindergarten teacher. So everybody understands this stuff. What they don't understand is how best to apply it.
Well, it is a challenge, and given that the book that you referred to, that Daniel Goleman wrote on emotional intelligence, having been on the bestseller list for 30 years, yet it is elusive still, exemplifies exactly that principle that we learn this stuff, but we forget to apply it all the time. I mean, we need to apply it all the time. I know myself, when I have an emotional reaction, somebody will annoy me, and I'll have an off-the-cuff ooh, and I'll think about that reaction, and I'll go back to that person and say, you know what, I'm really sorry I reacted that way. That was inappropriate, but it really caught me off guard. A simple thing like that can do an enormous amount to heal a relationship. Whether it's a personal relationship or whether it's with an organization or anything.
Well, I can tell you, I've gone through numerous situations where I've shot the messenger, and it's been an immediate reaction. Nobody likes hearing bad news.
No.
But we have to hear what we need to hear, and if we can create and be fairly consistent about how we respond to receiving something we really don't want to hear but have to hear, and just say to the person, yes, I'm sorry, but I'm being human. but don't leave the discussion there. Just to say, now, what are we going to do together to fix it?
That's right.
And that's, it's not complex stuff by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
That's why even just talking about it and trying to convince people that this is important, that it matters, that is for people to individually do. And with each of these characteristics, look at it and say, how emotionally intelligent am I? And how do others see me? And it's a journey to reduce, in my view, reducing a lot of stress in your life, in terms of, it is stressful to hold something in, hold an emotion in.
That's right. And it's not only stressful, it's damaging to your health to hold emotions. And suppressing anything is bad. And emotions are not well understood by most people from the sort of the biological, chemical end of things, but it has been proven that suppressing emotions is damaging to your health, not just your mental health, but your physical health too. So,
well, there's definitely a lot of science around that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're needing or wanting to get people to look at it in a clinical, psychological way, but look at it in terms of, as you indicated a bit earlier, just doing unto others as you would have them do unto you.
And hopefully that will reduce the unnecessary stress in the workplace. And I think that that does explain really the difference between emotions and emotional intelligence.
It's reacting in a very strategic way, in an emotionally intelligent way versus an emotional way.
Right.
And there is that is the main message here.
Yeah.
And how people do that will vary.
Yes.
And there's a lot. I've written a lot about it. The people at Yale, actually, emotional intelligence originated, and the book was based on a paper written by Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer. And Peter Salovey is now the president of Yale University. So we're starting at the origin of the science of emotional intelligence, and I like to think I'm contributing a little in a little way to helping people apply the characteristic of being emotionally intelligent.
Well, I think you actually have done more than just a little bit, Andy. I think you've helped a lot of people. And I think that brings us to the point where I'd like to reiterate to our audience to think about how you rate yourself as being emotionally intelligent, and how you would rate someone who you hold in high regard, and how other people would rate you. I think it's a great exercise to do with all of these characteristics. And Andy, thank you very much for all of your insights today. And thank you for allowing us into your living room this evening. We look forward to seeing you next week when we will be discussing F is for Fair.
Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.